The moment my son looked at me and said, "I don't trust you anymore," something inside my chest cracked in a way I didn't know was possible. We were standing in my own living room. Two strangers sat across from me, calm, confident, and disturbingly certain, while my son, Ethan, stood beside them like I was the enemy. They accused me of stealing from him, and my own son believed them. I tried to speak. I tried to explain, but every word I said seemed to push him further away. What I didn't understand was this. How did two strangers walk into our lives and take my son from me in a matter of weeks because the truth was far worse than betrayal? It was something planned, and someone had been watching all along. If you've ever been misunderstood by someone you love, I'd really like to hear your story. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if this story touches something in you, you can like or subscribe, but more than anything, just stay with me. I've spent most of my life with grease under my fingernails and a wrench in my hand. That's the kind of man I am. Or at least that's the kind of man I used to believe I was. My name is Isaac Harrison. I'm 70 years old, and for nearly 40 of those years, I worked as a mechanic in a small shop just outside Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of job people brag about at dinner parties. But it was honest work, and it fed my family. Back when I still had one. My wife Eleanor used to say that I smelled like engine oil even after I showered. She'd wrinkle her nose and laugh, then pull me close anyway. She had this way of making everything feel lighter, even when money was tight, and life felt like it was closing in around us. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And then we had Ethan. He was born on a cold January morning, the kind where the sky looks like it's made of steel. I remember holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine, and thinking, this is it. This is what everything is for. From that moment on, everything I did was for him. When Eleanor got sick, Ethan was only 12, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to feel the fear in the house. I tried to shield him from it. I worked longer hours, picked up extra shifts, anything to cover the medical bills and keep things as normal as possible. But there's no such thing as normal when someone you love is fading away. The night she passed, Ethan didn't cry right away. He just stood there staring at the hospital bed, like he was waiting for her to sit up and tell us it was all some kind of mistake. I remember putting my hand on his shoulder, not knowing what to say, and realizing something that terrified me more than anything else. It was just the two of us now, and I had no idea how to be both a father and a mother. But I tried. God, I tried. I burned dinners more times than I can count. I forgot school meetings. I once sent Ethan to school in mismatched shoes because I was too exhausted to notice. But I never stopped showing up. Not once. I was there at every baseball game, even when I had to leave work early and risk my boss's anger. I sat through every parent-teacher conference nodding like I understood half the things they were saying. I learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video once, even though Ethan didn't need it. I just didn't want him to feel like he was missing anything. I gave him everything I had. And maybe that was my first mistake. Because when you give someone everything, they don't always see the cost. They just see what's missing. Ethan grew up smart. Smarter than I ever was. He got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and eventually earned himself a spot at a decent college. I still remember the day his acceptance letter came in. He ran into the house waving that envelope like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Dad, I got in." I picked him up and spun him around like he was still that little boy with tiny fingers. I don't think I'd ever been prouder, but college wasn't cheap, and I didn't have savings. Not really. So I did what I'd always done. I worked. I took on night shifts. I fixed cars on weekends for cash. I sold the old motorcycle I'd been restoring for years, something I'd promised myself I'd ride someday when life slowed down. Life never slowed down. But Ethan got through school. And when he graduated, standing there in his cap and gown, smiling like the world was finally opening up for him, I told myself it had all been worth it. Every missed meal, every sleepless night, every dream I'd quietly let go of. It was all worth it. At least that's what I believed. After college, Ethan didn't move far. He found a job in the city, something in marketing that I never quite understood, and rented an apartment with a couple of friends. He'd come by on Sundays sometimes. We'd sit at the kitchen table, eat whatever I managed to cook, and talk about his week. Those Sundays became the anchor of my life, but then they started happening less often. At first, it was small things. I've got a meeting, Dad. Rain check. Work's been crazy. Maybe next week. I'm out with some friends tonight. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They build their own lives. That's what they're supposed to do. Still, the house felt quieter each time he didn't show up. The silence started to stretch. And then, one evening, he showed up with them. Victor Blake and Sophie Blake. Dad. This is Victor and Sophie, Ethan said, stepping into the house like nothing had changed. They're helping me with a business opportunity. Victor was the first to step forward. He was tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in a magazine. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Mr. Harrison, I've heard a lot about you, he said. Something about the way he said it made my skin tighten. Isaac is fine, I replied. Sophie stood just behind him, her smile softer, but her eyes sharper. She scanned the room like she was taking inventory, every piece of furniture, every framed photo, every little detail that made this house mine. It's such a lovely home, she said. You must be very proud. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what she meant by that. Ethan seemed excited, more animated than I'd seen him in months. He talked fast, explaining something about investments, growth partnerships. Words that sounded important but felt slippery. Victor did most of the talking, though. We see a lot of potential in Ethan, he said. He's got the right instincts. With the right guidance, he could build something significant. I glanced at my son. He was practically glowing under the praise. And that's when I felt it. That quiet, creeping unease. It wasn't anything obvious. They were polite, respectful even. But there was something underneath it all, something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way Victor answered questions before Ethan could. Or the way Sophie watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. Or maybe it was just instinct, the kind you get after a lifetime of fixing things that are broken. You learn to recognize the sound something makes when it's about to fail. That night after they left, I sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table. You trust them? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yeah, Dad, I do. I studied his face, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that told me he was thinking this through. But all I saw was certainty. They just want to help me, he added. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. Sometimes, I said slowly, people don't help for free. Ethan frowned. You don't even know them? I know enough, I replied. His expression changed then. Just slightly, but enough. Enough for me to realize something had already shifted. You always do this, he said. Do what? Assume the worst. Control everything. The words hit harder than I expected. I'm not trying to control you, I said quietly. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection, he shot back. Silence filled the room. The kind of silence that doesn't just sit there, it presses down on you. I just want you to be careful, I said. Ethan stood up, pushing his chair back a little too hard. I know what I'm doing, Dad. And just like that, the distance between us grew. Not all at once, but enough for me to feel it. enough for me to know something had started, and I wasn't part of it anymore. The first time Victor Blake walked into my house, I told myself I was being paranoid. By the third time, I knew I wasn't. It started with small things, the kind most people would ignore. Victor didn't just visit. He lingered. He'd sit in my living room like he belonged there, legs crossed, arm draped over the back of the couch, speaking in that smooth, confident tone that made everything sound like an opportunity. Sophie, on the other hand, moved quietly. Too quietly. She'd walk through the house with a polite smile, but her eyes were always searching. Like she was memorizing where everything was. Like she was measuring something. I noticed things like that. You don't spend a lifetime fixing broken engines without learning how to notice what's off. One evening, I came home from the shop later than usual. My back ached, my hands were stiff, and all I wanted was a quiet dinner. Instead, I found them already there. Victor was sitting at the kitchen table with Ethan papers spread out in front of them. Sophie stood by the counter, pouring herself a glass of water, like she'd done it 100 times before. "Evening, Isaac," Victor said, not even looking up at first. "We were just going over some numbers." I set my keys down slowly. "My house isn't an office," I replied. Ethan sighed. "Dad, it's just temporary. We need a place to meet. There are coffee shops," I said. Victor chuckled lightly like I'd just made a harmless joke. "We prefer somewhere more private," he said. "Business discussions can be sensitive." That word again. Business. Everything was business with him. I walked closer, glancing at the papers. Numbers, charts, contracts. Too clean. Too polished. "Mind if I take a look?" I asked. Ethan immediately pulled the papers closer to himself. "It's complicated, Dad. You wouldn't really—" "I can read," I said, sharper than I intended. Silence fell for a moment. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying me. "It's all right, Ethan," he said smoothly. "Transparency builds trust." He slid one of the documents across the table toward me. I picked it up, scanning the page. It looked legitimate at first glance. Legal language, signatures, terms. But something didn't sit right. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "It's a partnership agreement," Ethan said. "We're forming a small investment group." "With whose money?" Ethan hesitated. "Mine, and some initial contributions." I looked at Victor. He smiled. "We're helping Ethan grow his assets," he said. "He has a strong starting point." A cold feeling settled in my chest. "What starting point?" I asked. Ethan avoided my eyes. "The funds you've been managing," he said. I blinked. "What funds?" "The money you saved for me," he said, his voice tightening. "The college fund, the investments." I felt like the floor shifted under me. "There were no investments," I said slowly. "Just savings. And most of that went to your tuition." Victor raised an eyebrow. "That's not what our records show." I turned to him. "What records?" Sophie stepped forward, then placing another document on the table. "This account," she said, gently pointing. "It's under your name. Significant withdrawals over the years." I stared at the paper. It had my name on it, my signature, dates, amounts. But it wasn't right. "I've never seen this before," I said. Ethan let out a frustrated breath. "Dad, it's right there." "It's not mine," I insisted. Victor folded his hands together. "Isaac, no one's accusing you of anything yet," he said calmly. "But Ethan deserves clarity." The way he said it, it sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. "I've been clear," I said. "Every dollar I had went into raising him. Sophie tilted her head slightly. Then how do you explain the discrepancies? I looked at Ethan again. He wasn't looking at me the same way anymore. There was doubt in his eyes. Real doubt. I don't need to explain something I didn't do, I said. Ethan stood up, suddenly pacing. This is exactly what I mean, he said. You never tell me anything. You just expect me to trust you. I raised you, I snapped. That should count for something. That's not an answer. The room felt smaller, tighter. Victor stayed seated, watching us like this was all part of a show he'd seen before. Maybe he said gently, "This is just a misunderstanding." I didn't believe him, not for a second, but Ethan wanted to. I just want the truth, Ethan said, his voice quieter now. I took a step toward him. You have it, I said, right here. I placed my hand on my chest. He didn't move, didn't respond. Sophie stepped back, her expression unreadable. Victor stood up slowly. We don't need to resolve this tonight, he said. These things take time. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Think about what we discussed. Then he turned to me. We'll continue this conversation soon. They left together. The door closed behind them with a soft click, but the silence they left behind was anything but soft. Ethan stood in the middle of the room staring at the table. You should have told me, he said finally. Told you what I asked, about the money, about everything. There is no everything, I said. There's just what is, and what isn't. He shook his head. I don't even know what to believe anymore. Those words cut deeper than anything else he'd said, because that was the moment I realized it wasn't just about money. It was about trust. And somehow, I was losing. I'm your father, I said quietly. I know, he replied. But it didn't sound like he meant it the same way anymore. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen long after he went to bed. The papers were still on the table. I picked one up again, studying the signature. It looked like mine, close enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. But I did know better, and that's when the thought hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. Carefully built, piece by piece. And Ethan, he was standing right in the middle of it, without even realizing it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since Eleanor passed. Fear. Not for myself, but for my son. Because if I was right, then those two strangers hadn't just walked into our lives by accident. They had come for something, and they weren't going to leave empty-handed. The shift didn't happen all at once. That would have been easier to fight. No, it happened slowly, quietly. Like a leak you don't notice until the damage is already done. A few days after that conversation, Ethan stopped asking me anything about the business. Before, he used to at least mention things in passing ideas, plans, questions he didn't fully understand. Now, nothing. It was like a door had closed, and I wasn't on the other side of it. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Ethan already dressed, pacing with his phone pressed against his ear. Yes, that makes sense. And I wasn't on the other side of it. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Ethan already dressed, pacing with his phone pressed against his ear. Yes, that makes sense, he was saying. No, I get it. He just doesn't understand how things work anymore. I froze. He turned slightly when he saw me lowering his voice. I'll call you back, he said quickly, then ended the call. Silence hung between us. Morning, I said. Morning, he replied, but his tone was flat, distant. I poured myself a cup of coffee, trying to act like I hadn't just heard what I heard. Who was that? I asked casually. Victor, he said. Of course it was. I nodded slowly. You've been talking to him a lot. It's business, Dad, Ethan said, grabbing his keys. That's what people do in business. People, not us, not family, just people. You used to talk to me, I said before I could stop myself. Ethan paused at the door. Then he sighed. About what he asked. You don't even believe in what I'm doing. That's not true, I said. I just want to understand it. He turned back to me, frustration flickering across his face. You don't want to understand it. You want to control it. The word hit me again. Control. I'm trying to help you avoid a mistake, I said. Or maybe you just don't like that I'm doing something without you. He shot back. I stared at him. Is that what you think? He didn't answer right away, and somehow that was worse than if he had. I've got to go, he said, finally opening the door. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there, coffee growing cold in my hands, replaying the conversation over and over again. Somewhere along the line, I had gone from being his father to being an obstacle. That evening, Victor and Sophie came back. Of course they did. This time, they didn't even knock. Sophie opened the door like she lived there, stepping inside with that same polite smile. Isaac, she said warmly. We hope we're not interrupting anything. You are, I replied. She didn't react. Victor followed behind her, carrying a leather folder. Ethan mentioned you had concerns, he said. I don't have concerns, I said. I have instincts. Victor smiled faintly. Sometimes instincts can be misleading, and sometimes they're the only thing keeping you from getting hurt, I said. Ethan walked in a moment later, glancing between us. Can we not do this again, he said. We're just trying to move forward, and sometimes they're the only thing keeping you from getting hurt, I said. Ethan walked in a moment later, glancing between us. Can we not do this again? He said. We're just trying to move forward. Forward. That word again. Forward without me. Victor placed the folder on the table. Let's focus on facts, he said. We've gathered additional documentation. I crossed my arms. More papers with my name on them. Evidence, Sophie corrected gently. I stepped closer, looking at the documents. Bank statements, transaction histories, all showing withdrawals I didn't remember making, amounts that didn't make sense, dates that didn't line up with anything I knew. This is fabricated, I said. Ethan exhaled sharply. Dad? No, I cut in. Look at this. Look at the dates. I pointed to one line. I was working a double shift that day, 12 hours straight. There's no way I made that transaction. Victor leaned in slightly. People forget things, he said calmly, especially over long periods. I don't forget thousands of dollars, I snapped. Sophie placed a hand lightly on Ethan's arm. We're not here to accuse, she said softly. We just want clarity. Clarity. They kept using that word like it meant something good, like it wasn't just another way of saying they didn't trust me. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. This doesn't make sense, Dad, he said. All of this money, it's just gone. It went to you, I said. To your school, to your life. That's not what this shows, because it's not real, I shouted. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Victor straightened up, his expression unreadable now. Raising your voice won't change the numbers, he said. I turned to him. You don't belong in this conversation? I think I do, he replied evenly. Ethan invited me, and there it was, the line, clear and sharp. Ethan stepped between us. "Dad, stop," he said. "You're making this worse." "Worse?" I let out a bitter laugh. "I'm making it worse," I said. "These two walk into our lives, start throwing around fake documents, and I'm the problem." "They're not fake," Ethan insisted. "You don't know that." "I trust them." The words hung in the air, heavy, final. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't recognize him. Since when, I asked quietly. "What? Since when do you trust strangers more than your own father?" Ethan hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. "Since the evidence started adding up," he said. Something inside me went still, completely still. Victor didn't say anything. Sophie didn't move. They didn't need to. The damage was already done. I stepped back slowly. "All right," I said. Ethan frowned. "All right what? All right?" I repeated. "If that's what you believe, then there's nothing I can say." Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was empty. I turned away from them, walking toward the hallway. Isaac Victor called after me. I didn't stop. "Whatever you're trying to do," I said without turning around, "it won't work forever." I heard Sophie shift slightly behind me. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. I paused at the doorway. Then I looked back at my son. "They're not who you think they are," I said. Ethan shook his head. "You're wrong. Maybe I was. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Because something about all of this felt too precise, too controlled. Like every step had been planned before I even realized we were moving. And the worst part, Ethan was following that plan. Every single step, without even seeing it. I walked into my room and closed the door behind me. For the first time in years, I locked it. Not because I was afraid of them, but because I was starting to understand something I didn't want to believe. I wasn't just losing an argument. I was losing my son. And if I didn't figure out what was really going on, I was going to lose him completely. The first time they said it out loud, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, it felt unreal. We were sitting in the living room that evening. The same room where I had watched Ethan take his first steps. The same room where Eleanor used to sit by the window reading her books in the late afternoon light. Now it felt like a courtroom. Victor sat across from me, calm as ever, his fingers lightly tapping against the armrest. Sophie sat beside him, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. Ethan stood near the fireplace. Not beside me, not anymore. Beside them. "Let's just address it directly," Victor said, breaking the silence. "There's no benefit in avoiding it." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Go ahead," I said. He nodded once, like he appreciated my cooperation. We believe he continued that a portion of Ethan's funds were mismanaged or withheld. There it was, clean, polished, like he'd rehearsed it. I let out a slow breath. "You believe wrong." Sophie shifted slightly. "We're not accusing you of malicious intent," she said gently. "Sometimes these things happen over time. Small decisions that add up." "Stop," I said sharply. She fell silent. "I didn't mismanage anything," I continued. "Every dollar I handled went where it was supposed to go." Ethan finally spoke. "Then why doesn't the account reflect that I turned to him?" "Because the account isn't real." His jaw tightened. "That's convenient." I felt something twist in my chest. "Convenient," I repeated. Victor leaned forward slightly, placing a document on the coffee table between us. This is a certified statement, he said, pulled from financial records associated with your name. I stared at it. My name was there again. I stared at it. My name was there again. So was the signature. The numbers were larger this time. Much larger. Withdrawals spanning years. Amounts that could have changed a life. Ethan's life. Look at the dates, I said, forcing on my voice to stay steady. I have. So was the signature. The numbers were larger this time. Much larger. Withdrawals spanning years. Amounts that could have changed a life. Ethan's life. Look at the dates, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. I have, Ethan replied. Then you should know, they don't match reality. They match the records. Records can be forged. Victor raised a hand calmly. Isaac, please, let's keep this productive. I looked at him, really looked at him. There was something different now. The friendliness was still there, but thinner, like a mask starting to slip. You're very comfortable talking about my finances, I said. I'm comfortable talking about facts, he replied. No, I said quietly. You're comfortable controlling the narrative. Sophie's eyes flickered, just for a second. Victor didn't react. I understand this is difficult, he said, but Ethan deserves transparency. There it is again, I muttered. Transparency. Ethan stepped forward. Why won't you just explain it? He asked. I have explained it, I said louder now. There's nothing to explain because it didn't happen. Then where did the money go? He demanded. To you, I snapped. The words echoed in the room. To your tuition, your rent, your life. I continued. Do you think that was free? Do you think it just appeared out of nowhere? Ethan hesitated, and for a brief moment, I saw something. Doubt. But it didn't last. Victor spoke again, his tone calm but firmer now. Even accounting for those expenses, he said, there are still significant discrepancies. Sophie slid another paper forward. This shows transfers to accounts that aren't linked to Ethan's expenses, she said. I picked it up, scanning the page. My hands trembled slightly. Because this one looked even more convincing. Account numbers, transaction codes, everything lined up perfectly, too perfectly. This isn't mine, I said, quietly. It has your signature, Ethan replied. I looked at him. You think I would steal from you? I don't know what to think anymore, he said, his voice breaking slightly. That hurt more than anything else. Not the accusation, not the documents, but that. I raised you, I said softly. Every day, every year. I gave you everything I had. I know, he said. Then how can you even consider this? Ethan looked down at the papers. Because it's right in front of me, he said. Victor nodded slightly like he agreed. That's the challenge with these situations, he said. Emotions can cloud judgment. I turned to him. You don't get to talk about emotions. He held my gaze. Then let's talk about facts. I stood up slowly. All right, I said. Here's a fact. They all watched me. I have never taken a single dollar from my son that wasn't for him. Silence. And here's another fact, I continued. You two showed up out of nowhere, started digging into things that were never your business. And suddenly, there's all this evidence. Sophie opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out's all this evidence. Sophie opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. No, I said. You don't get to spin this. Victor's expression hardened slightly. We're trying to help Ethan protect himself. From me? I asked. Yes, Ethan said. The word landed like a punch. From me. I nodded slowly. I see. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not broke, not yet, but shifted. Because I realized something important. They didn't need to prove anything to me. They just needed to convince him. And they were doing a damn good job. I want you to think about something I said, looking directly at Ethan. He didn't respond. Not the papers. Not what they're telling you. Just think. His eyes flickered, uncertain. If I wanted your money, I continued, why would I spend my entire life giving it to you? Silence. Victor leaned back slightly. That's a fair question, he admitted. I looked at him sharply. But it doesn't negate the records, he added. Of course it didn't. Nothing would. Because this wasn't about logic anymore. It was about perception. And they had already shaped his. Ethan ran a hand through his hair again. I just need time, he said quietly. Time. Victor nodded. Of course, he said. Take all the time you need. Sophie gave Ethan a reassuring smile. We're here for you, she said. I watched that moment, really watched it. The way Ethan looked at them, the way he leaned slightly in their direction, the way their presence seemed to steady him. Not mine, theirs. And that's when I understood something that made my stomach turn. They weren't just accusing me, they were replacing me, piece by piece. I exhaled slowly. All right, I said. Ethan looked at me. All right, what? Take your time, I said. What? Take your time, I said. Believe what you want to believe. There was no anger in my voice now, no fight, just exhaustion. I turned and walked toward the hallway again. Isaac Ethan called after me. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I believe what you want to believe. There was no anger in my voice now, no fight, just exhaustion. I turned and walked toward the hallway again. Isaac Ethan called after me. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. If this turns out to be true, he said hesitantly. I just need you to be honest with me. I closed my eyes for a second, just 1 second. Then I opened them again. I already am, I said. And this time I didn't look back. The night Ethan said it, I didn't argue anymore. Not because I agreed, but because something inside me finally understood. I wasn't going to win this with words. We were back in the living room again. Same place, same arrangement. Victor and Sophie sitting like they owned the space. Ethan standing restless, caught between something he didn't fully understand and something he didn't want to admit. And me, standing there watching my own son drift further away. I've gone through everything, Ethan said, his voice tight. Every document, every transaction, every record they showed me. I didn't respond. I already knew where this was going, and it all points to the same thing, he continued. Victor didn't speak. Sophie didn't move. They didn't need to. They had already planted everything. All they had to do now was wait. Ethan looked at me. I need you to tell me the truth, he said. I held his gaze. I have. No. He shook his head. Not like this. Not with all of this in front of me. He gestured to the papers on the table, the fake life they had built around my name. Just say it, he said. If something went wrong, if you made a mistake, I can handle that. A mistake? I almost smiled, because what they were accusing me of wasn't a mistake. It was betrayal. And there are some things you don't confess just to make someone feel better. I didn't take anything from you, I said. Ethan closed his eyes briefly like he was trying to stay calm. Why won't you just admit it? He asked quietly. Because there's nothing to admit. That's not what the evidence says. The evidence is fake. His voice rose. So everything is fake. Every single document, every number, every signature. Yes, I said firmly. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to, I replied. It just has to look real enough to fool you. Silence. That hit him. I saw it. But Victor stepped in before it could grow. Ethan, he said gently, this is exactly what we discussed. I turned to him. Don't I warned? He ignored me. When someone feels cornered, he continued, they often deny responsibility. It's a natural reaction. I stepped forward. You don't get to analyze me. I'm not analyzing you, he said calmly. I'm explaining a pattern. You're manipulating him. Sophie sighed softly. Isaac, please, she said. This isn't helping. I looked at her. Helping who? She didn't answer. Ethan ran his hands over his face, frustrated. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said again, and there it was. That same sentence. The one that kept echoing. The one that meant I was losing him. I'm right here, I said quietly. You don't need to look anywhere else. He shook his head slowly. That's the problem, he said. What does that mean? It means I trusted you without question my whole life, he said. And now I don't know if that was a mistake. That one broke something. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something old finally giving way. I nodded slowly. I see, I said. Victor shifted slightly, watching me more carefully now, because something in my voice had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't fighting. I was like something old finally giving way. I nodded slowly. I see, I said. Victor shifted slightly, watching me more carefully now, because something in my voice had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't fighting. I was tired, deeply, painfully tired. Ethan took a breath. I'm going to ask you one more time, he said. And I need you to be honest with me. I didn't interrupt. Did you ever take money that was supposed to be mine? The question hung in the air, heavy, final. This was it. Not the documents, not Victor, not Sophie. This was the moment. I looked at my son, at the boy I had raised, at the man standing in front of me now. This was it. Not the documents, not Victor, not Sophie. This was the moment. I looked at my son, at the boy I had raised, at the man standing in front of me now, unsure of who I was. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. He wasn't asking because he wanted the truth. He was asking because he was ready for a confession, because that would make everything easier, cleaner. I already told you, I said softly. That's not enough, he snapped. Silence fell again, and then he said it. I believe them. 3 words. Simple, clear, final. I felt the air leave my lungs, not like a shock, not like a blow, but like something inevitable had finally arrived. Victor didn't smile. Sophie didn't react. But I could feel it. They had won this round. Ethan stepped back slightly, like he needed space. I didn't want it to be true, he said, his voice quieter now. But everything points to it. Everything. Everything except me. I nodded slowly. All right, I said. He looked at me confused. All right, I repeated. There was no anger in my voice, no desperation, just acceptance. Not of the accusation, but of the situation. Ethan frowned. Why aren't you fighting this? He asked. I almost laughed. I have been, I said. You just stopped listening. That hit him harder than I expected. But he didn't respond. Victor stood up, adjusting his jacket. Maybe we should give everyone some time, he said. Yeah, Ethan murmured. Yeah, maybe. Sophie gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. Like evidence after a verdict. I watched them. Really watched them. The confidence, the control, the precision. And for the first time, I saw something else. Not in Ethan, but in them. A flicker. Small. Quick. But real. Like they weren't entirely comfortable. Like they were watching me now. Not dismissing me. Watching. That was new. And that told me something important. They knew I wasn't broken yet. Ethan walked toward the door. I'm going to stay at Victor's place for a few days, he said. The words landed harder than anything else that night. Just until I figure things out. I nodded. Of course. He hesitated. Just for a moment, like he was waiting for me to stop him, to argue, to beg. I didn't, because I knew if I did, it would only push him further away. He'll call you, he said. I didn't answer. He left anyway. The door closed. And this time, it felt final. Victor and Sophie followed him out, but not before Victor paused. He looked back at me, for a second too long. Then he smiled. Take care, Isaac, he said. I didn't respond. They left, and the house went silent. Completely silent. I stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by memories that suddenly felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Then slowly I sat down. The chair creaked under me. Same sound it had always made. Same house. Same life. But nothing felt the same. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. And I thought about everything that had happened. Every conversation, every document, every look, every word. And then I started putting it together. Not emotionally, logically, like I used to do with broken engines. Piece by piece, pattern by pattern. Because something about all of this, it was too clean, too structured, too intentional. And that meant one thing. This wasn't random. This was designed, carefully, deliberately. And if it was designed, then somewhere there was a flaw. I leaned back slowly, staring at the empty room. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't just reacting. I was thinking. Really thinking. Because I had lost my son's trust. That much was clear. But I hadn't lost the truth. And sooner or later, the truth always shows itself. You just have to be patient enough to find it. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It wasn't that anything had physically changed. The same couch sat in the same place. The same clock ticked on the wall. Eleanor's photo still rested on the shelf by the window. But something invisible had shifted. And once something like that moves, you can't just put it back. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because sleep had stopped coming easily. Silence does that to you. Too much of it, and your thoughts start getting louder. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee staring at the empty chair across from me, the one Ethan used to sit in every Sunday. Now it felt like a memory instead of a habit. I told myself I needed to stay calm. Think, not react. Because reacting hadn't worked. It had only pushed him further toward them. So I started going through everything again. Not emotionally, mechanically, like I used to do at the shop. You don't fix an engine by yelling at it. You take it apart, piece by piece. Find what doesn't belong. That's what I needed to do. Around mid-morning, I heard the front door open. I frowned. Ethan wasn't supposed to be back. But then, I heard Sophie's voice. "Just a minute," she said softly. I stayed where I was listening. Footsteps moved through the hallway. Drawers opened, closed. I stood up slowly, walked toward the living room. And there she was, Sophie, standing near the cabinet where I kept old documents. She turned when she saw me. "Oh," she said, placing a hand over her chest. "I didn't realize you were home." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. "What are you doing?" I asked. She smiled. "Ethan asked me to grab a few things," she said. "Some paperwork we might need." Without asking me, her smile didn't fade. We didn't think it would be a problem. I stepped closer. For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear. Something else. Calculation. Then it was gone. "Of course," she said. I ate was gone. "Of course," she said. "I apologize. I didn't mean to overstep." She moved away from the cabinet. Too easily, too smoothly, like she had already taken what she needed. "Where's Ethan?" I asked. "With Victor," she replied. "They're reviewing some final numbers." "Apologize. I didn't mean to overstep." She moved away from the cabinet, too easily, too smoothly, like she had already taken what she needed. "Where's Ethan?" I asked. "With Victor," she replied. "They're reviewing some final numbers." Final numbers? That didn't sit right. What numbers I pressed? She hesitated. "Just a fraction. Just the investment structure," she said. I didn't believe her. "Not for a second. Stay out of my things," I said firmly. She nodded. "Of course." But the way she said it, it didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like, "Just the investment structure," she said. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. "Stay out of my things," I said firmly. She nodded. Of course. But the way she said it, it didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like acknowledgement, like she had already done what she came to do. She walked toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "You know," she said softly, "Ethan really wants to trust you." I stared at her. "Then stop giving him reasons not to," she added. The words were gentle, but the message wasn't. Then she left. The door closed, and I stood there staring at the cabinet. Something wasn't right. I walked over and opened it. Files, old papers, receipts. Everything looked normal. At first, then I noticed it. One folder was slightly out of place. Just a little. Most people wouldn't have seen it. But I did. I pulled it out. Opened it. My stomach tightened. A few documents were missing. Important ones. Records from years ago. The kind that could actually prove where the money went. I stood there holding the folder, my mind racing. This wasn't random. This wasn't curiosity. This was intentional. They were removing anything that could contradict their story. I closed my eyes for a moment, then exhaled slowly. All right. Now I knew. This wasn't just manipulation. This was control. Full control. They weren't just convincing Ethan. They were rewriting reality around him, piece by piece. I grabbed my keys. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't going to wait. I drove straight to the shop, the place I hadn't visited in days. The smell of oil and metal hit me the moment I stepped inside. Familiar, grounding, real. "Isaac, my old coworker," Mike called out. "Didn't expect to see you." "Yeah," I said. I needed to check something. I walked over to the back office, pulled open the old filing cabinet. This one, they didn't know about. Because this was mine. Personal records I kept separate from everything else. Not organized, not pretty, but real. I flipped through the files, my hands moving faster now. Tax records, pay stubs, old receipts. Then there, I found it. A thick envelope, labeled in my handwriting. Ethan Education Expenses. I opened it. Inside were copies of payments, tuition transfers, housing costs. Every dollar accounted for. Every single one. I sat down heavily in the chair, staring at the papers. This was the truth. Messy, unpolished, but undeniable. And suddenly, everything became clear. They hadn't just created fake documents, they had removed the real ones. Because if Ethan ever saw this, their entire story would collapse. I leaned back, gripping the edge of the desk. For the first time in days, I felt something different. Not fear, not sadness, something sharper. Focus. Because now, I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't reacting. I knew what they were doing. And more importantly, I knew how to fight it. Not with words, not with emotion, with proof. I gathered the documents carefully, placing them back into the envelope. Then I stood up. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. They had taken my son's trust. They had twisted his reality. They had pushed me out of my own life. But they had made one mistake. They thought I was done. They thought I was just an old man, outmatched, outnumbered, finished. They were wrong. Because I had spent my entire life fixing things that were broken. And this was just another system. Another machine. And somewhere inside it, there was a flaw. And I was going to find it. Once you know something is wrong, you can't unknow it. That's the problem with truth. It doesn't care whether you're ready for it or not. I drove home slower than usual that afternoon, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like it carried more than just paper. Because it did. It carried proof. Real proof. Not polished. Not staged. Not carefully arranged to tell a story. Just truth. And yet, I already knew truth alone wasn't going to be enough. Because Ethan wasn't looking for truth anymore. He was looking for confirmation. And Victor and Sophie had already given him that. When I got back to the house, it felt even quieter than before. Not empty, occupied, but not by me. I walked straight to the living room and placed the envelope on the table. Then I sat down and started organizing everything. Every receipt, every transfer, every documented expense tied to Ethan. I laid them out carefully, building the story the way it actually happened. Step by step, year by year, college payments, rent deposits, books, insurance, medical bills I covered when he couldn't. Everything. By the time I was done, the table looked like something entirely different from what Victor had shown him. Not clean, not simple, but real. Messy in a way life actually is. I leaned back, staring at it all. This was my life's work. Not money, not assets, but sacrifice. And now it had been turned into an accusation. I rubbed my hands together slowly, thinking. They removed documents. That meant they were afraid of something. They were careful, but not perfect. No one ever is. That's when I remembered something. Not from the house. From them. Sophie. The way she moved through the cabinets. The way she hesitated for just a second when I asked what she was doing. And Victor. The way he always answered before Ethan could. Controlled conversations. Directed outcomes. That wasn't just manipulation. That was experience. They had done this before, which meant they had patterns. And patterns leave traces. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and headed out again. This time, I wasn't going to the shop. I was going somewhere else, a place I hadn't been in years. The county records office. If Victor and Sophie were creating fake financial trails, they needed something to base it on. Real accounts, real names, real histories. I walked into the building, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. The clerk at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you? I need access to some public financial filings," I said. She nodded. "Name?" I hesitated. Then I said it. "Victor Blake." She typed for a moment, then frowned slightly. "Do you have a middle initial?" "No." She shook her head. "There are multiple entries under that name." Of course there were. People like him never made it easy. "Can I see them?" I asked. She gestured toward a terminal. "Public access is over there." I sat down and started searching. Victor Blake, different states, different filings, different businesses. At first glance, everything looked normal. But then I noticed it. A pattern. Short-lived companies. Small investment groups. All dissolved within a few years. And always with a partner. Sometimes different name. Sometimes the same. But one name showed up more than once. Sophie Blake. Or variations of it. Different last names. Different spellings. But the same first name. I leaned closer to the screen. This wasn't coincidence. This was a system. They moved, changed names, set up new operations, left before things caught up to them. And in every case, there were complaints. Not criminal charges. Not enough for that. But complaints. Disputes. People claiming lost funds, mismanaged investments, confusion over records. Exactly like this. My jaw tightened. They had done this before. More than once. And Ethan. He wasn't special. He was just next. I printed everything I could find. Records, names, dates. Then I sat back for a moment, staring at the stack of papers in front of me. This was it. Not just defense. Offense. Because now I didn't just have my truth. I had theirs. I drove straight to Victor's place. I didn't call. Didn't warn anyone. Because I knew if I did, they'd prepare. And I didn't want prepared. I wanted real. When I pulled up, Ethan's car was already there. Good. That meant I wouldn't have to chase him down. I walked up to the door and knocked. Once, twice. Then Victor opened it. He looked surprised, but only for a second. "Isaac," he said, "this is unexpected." "I'm done waiting," I replied. His expression shifted slightly. "Ethan," he called over his shoulder, "your father's here." Ethan appeared a moment later. He looked tired, worn down. Good, because that meant the pressure was getting to him. "Dad," he said, "what are you doing here?" I stepped inside without asking. "We're going to finish this," I said. Victor closed the door slowly. "I'm not sure this is the best. It's exactly the best time I cut in." Sophie stood in the corner, watching. Always watching. I placed my envelope on the table. "Everything you need is in here," I said, looking directly at Ethan. He hesitated, then slowly walked over, opened it, started flipping through the documents. I didn't speak. I let the silence do the work. Because this wasn't about convincing him with words. It was about letting him see. Really see. "These are receipts," he said quietly. "Yes. Payments. Yes. All from you." "Yes." He kept flipping. Faster now. His breathing changing. "These match my tuition dates," he said. "I told you. And my rent, yes." And he stopped, looked up at me. Confusion, doubt, cracks, real cracks. Victor stepped forward. "These don't prove anything," he said smoothly. "They could be incomplete." I turned to him. "And what about these?" I asked, sliding the second stack across the table. He didn't touch them. But Sophie did. Her eyes scanned the first page. And for the first time since I met her, she froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. "What is that?" Ethan asked. "Your business partners," I said. Victor straightened. "Careful," he said. "No, and for the first time since I met her." She froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. "What is that?" Ethan asked. "Your business partners," I said. "Vic, your business partners," I said. Victor straightened. "Careful," he said. "No," I replied. "I've been careful long enough." Ethan picked up the papers, started reading. His brow furrowed. These are records," he said slowly. "Yes. Different companies, or straightened." "Careful," he said. "No," I replied. "I've been careful long enough." Ethan picked up the papers, started reading. His brow furrowed. These are records," he said slowly. "Yes. Different companies. Yes. Different names." His voice faltered, and the same pattern I finished. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Ethan looked up. Not at me. At them. "What is this?" he asked. Victor smiled slightly. "Old business ventures," he said. "Nothing unusual." "Then why are there complaints?" Ethan pressed. Sophie stepped forward. "Every business has disputes," she said. "But they all say the same thing," Ethan said, his voice rising. "Missing funds. Confusion. Misleading records." No one spoke. Because now, it wasn't me saying it. It was him. And that changed everything. I crossed my arms. "You wanted the truth," I said quietly. "Well, there it is." Ethan looked between us, his world shifting, finally, but not yet broken, not completely, because there was still one thing missing, the thing that would push it over the edge, the thing I hadn't found yet. But I knew it was coming, because people like Victor and Sophie, they don't just leave trails, they leave witnesses, and somewhere out there, someone had seen enough, someone who hadn't stayed silent, and when they finally spoke, everything would fall apart. There's a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when everything finally tips. Not because of one big revelation, but because all the small cracks can't hold anymore. That moment came faster than I expected. Ethan didn't say anything after reading the documents. Not right away. He just stood there flipping through the pages again and again, like he was hoping they would change if he looked at them long enough. "They line up," he said finally. His voice was low, unsteady. I didn't respond. I let him sit with it, because this time, the silence wasn't working against me. It was working for me. Victor stepped closer, his tone still calm, still controlled. "Documents can be curated," he said, "selected to tell a specific story." Ethan didn't look at him. "That's what you said about his records," he replied. Victor paused. Just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it, that tiny hesitation. Sophie stepped in smoothly. "We're not saying your father is lying," she said. "We're saying there may be more to this." "There is," I said quietly. They both looked at me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the second set of records again. "More to your story," I added. Ethan looked between us. "What do you mean?" I placed the documents in front of him again. "These aren't just random business filings," I said. "Look at the timeline." He scanned the pages. "Different companies," he murmured. "Yes." "Different locations." "Yes." "But the same structure," I said. "The same pattern. The same outcome." Ethan's breathing changed. Slower. Heavier. "Complaints," he said. "Multiple." Victor exhaled softly. "You're taking this out of context," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm putting it into context." Sophie crossed her arms slightly. "These are public records," she said. "Anyone can file complaints. It doesn't mean anything was proven." "Maybe not," I said, "but it means something happened." Ethan looked up. "At them." "Not me. Why didn't you tell me about this?" he asked. Victor's expression didn't change. "Because it's irrelevant to what we're doing now." "It doesn't feel irrelevant," Ethan said. Sophie stepped closer to him. "Ethan, listen to me," she said gently. "We've been completely transparent with you." I almost laughed at that. Transparent. The word they loved so much. Ethan shook his head slightly. "You told me everything was new," he said. "That this was your first time working together." "It is," Victor replied. Ethan held up one of the papers. "Then why is her name here?" he asked, pointing to Sophie. Silence. Real silence this time. Not controlled, not managed. Sophie's expression tightened for just a second. Then she recovered. "That was a different situation," she said. "Years ago. You said you'd never done this before." I said we hadn't worked together like this before, she corrected. "That's not what you said," Ethan replied. Victor stepped in quickly. "This is getting off track," he said. "We're here to resolve the issue between you and your father." "No," Ethan said. His voice was stronger now, clearer. "We're here to figure out what's actually going on." That was new. That was very new. I stayed quiet because I knew this part I couldn't force. It had to come from him. Victor's tone shifted slightly, still calm, but tighter. "Ethan," he said, "we've been helping you protect your assets." "From him?" Ethan asked. "Yes." Ethan looked at the documents again, then at me, then back at them. "I don't know if that's true anymore," he said. And there it was. The shift. Not complete, not final, but real. Sophie took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Don't let confusion make you lose focus," she said. This is exactly how situations like this get complicated. Or maybe it's always been complicated, Ethan replied. Victor's jaw tightened. You're letting him manipulate you, he said. I finally spoke. No, I said quietly. I'm letting him think. Victor looked at me. This time, there was no smile, just calculation. Thinking requires clarity, he said, not emotion. I nodded. Then let's be clear, I said. I pointed to the documents on the table. These show exactly where the money went. Then I pointed to theirs, and those show where it didn't. Ethan swallowed. Hard. You told me he took it, he said to Victor. We said there were discrepancies, Victor replied carefully. No, Ethan said. You said he was hiding something. Silence again. Sophie's eyes flickered toward Victor, just for a moment. But Ethan saw it. I could tell he did. Because something in his expression changed. Not confusion, not doubt. Something sharper. Awareness. Why are you looking at him? He asked Sophie. She blinked. I'm not. Yes, you are, he said. You keep looking at him before you answer. Victor stepped forward. That's enough, he said firmly. Ethan stepped back. No, he said, it's not. The room shifted again. This time, the balance was breaking. Victor took a breath, trying to regain control. We're on your side, he said. Are you? Ethan asked. Yes. Then why does this feel like a script? Ethan shot back. That landed hard. Even Sophie didn't respond right away, because he was right. It had been a script, from the beginning, carefully written, carefully delivered, and now it was unraveling. Ethan ran his hands through his hair again, but this time, it wasn't frustration. It was realization. I need space, he said suddenly. Victor frowned. We can talk through this. No, Ethan said firmly. I need to think. Alone. Sophie stepped forward. We can help you process. I said alone. That stopped them. Completely. Because control only works when the other person lets you stay close. And for the first time, Ethan was pulling away. He grabbed his keys from the table. Victor started, but he didn't stop. He walked past them, past me, to the door. Then he paused, just for a second, and looked back. At me. Not at them. At me. I need to figure this out, he said quietly. I nodded. I know. He hesitated again, like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. Then he left. The door slammed behind him, and just like that, everything changed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. Victor turned to me slowly, his expression completely different now. No friendliness, no calm, just cold calculation. You shouldn't have done that, he said. I met his gaze. I should have done it sooner. Sophie crossed her arms, her polite mask gone. You don't understand what you've started, she said. I almost smiled. Oh, I understand perfectly, I replied. Victor took a step closer. You think this is over? He asked. No, I said. I think it's just beginning. He stared at me, long, hard. Then he nodded once. Be careful, Isaac, he said, of what I asked. He didn't answer. He just turned and walked out. Sophie followed, and just like that, I was alone again. But this time, it felt different, because I wasn't losing anymore, not completely. Ethan had started to see it, the cracks, the inconsistencies, the truth. And once someone sees that, they can't unsee it. I walked over to the table, gathering the documents slowly, because I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Doubt is the beginning, not the end. And somewhere, there was still one piece missing, the one thing that would make everything undeniable. The witness. The one person who had seen enough and was finally ready to speak. Hope doesn't come back all at once. It returns in fragments. A look, a hesitation, a question that didn't exist before. Ethan's question. Why are you looking at him kept echoing in my mind long after I left Victor's place. Because that wasn't doubt anymore. That was awareness. And once someone starts noticing behavior instead of just words, the illusion starts to crack. But cracks alone aren't enough. Not when someone has already been pulled so deep into a narrative. They need something stronger, something undeniable, something that doesn't come from me. That's when I started thinking about the one thing I hadn't found yet. The witness. Not documents, not records, a person. Because scams like this, they don't happen in isolation. Someone always sees something, even if they don't speak up right away. I just needed to find that person. The next morning, I went back to the county records office, but this time I wasn't looking for filings. I was looking for people. Excuse me, I said to the clerk from the day before. Do you happen to know if there's a way to access complaint records tied to these cases? She looked at me carefully. Depends, she said. Are you involved? In a way, I replied. She hesitated, then lowered her voice slightly. There are some public notes attached to certain filings. Not everything is formal, but sometimes people leave contact information. My pulse quickened. Can I see those? She nodded toward the terminal again. Same system. Just go deeper into the entries. I sat down and started searching again. This time, slower, more precise, looking beyond the main documents, scrolling through attached notes, comments, supplemental records. At first it was nothing, generic complaints, vague frustrations. Then I saw it. A name, attached to one of the older cases. Margaret Collins. A phone number. A short note. They said the same things. Promised transparency. I trusted them. My chest tightened. There it was. Not proof. Not yet. But a thread. And I knew how to follow threads. I wrote down the number. Sat there for a moment. Just holding it. Because I knew. Once I made this call, everything would move forward or fall apart. I stepped outside the sunlight, hitting my face as I dialed. It rang twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered. Hello, older. Steady. Is this Margaret Collins? I asked. Yes, who is this? My name is Isaac Harrison, I said. I believe you may have had some dealings with Victor Blake. Silence. Long silence. Then, how did you get this number? She asked. Public records, I replied. I'm not calling to cause trouble. I think the same thing that happened to you is happening to my son. Another pause. Heavier this time. You should walk away, she said quietly. I can't, I said. He's already involved. I heard her exhale slowly. They're very good at what they do, she said. I know, I replied. That's why I'm calling you. Silence again. Then, what do you want? She asked. The truth, I said. From someone who's seen it. She didn't answer right away, and I understood why. Because speaking up meant reliving it, and not everyone is ready for that. I'm not asking you to do anything public. I added, just talk to me. Help me understand what they did. Another long pause. Then finally, "Where are you?" she asked. "Columbus," I said. "I'm about 40 minutes out," she replied. "If you're serious, you can come here." My grip tightened on the phone. "It'll be there." She gave me an address, then hung up. No goodbye, no hesitation, just a decision. I drove the entire way in silence, because now, this wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about confirmation. Margaret's house was small, modest, the kind of place that tells you someone built a life carefully, piece by piece. I knocked. The door opened slowly. She stood there mid-60s, maybe older. Gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes that had seen things. "You're Isaac," she said. "Yes." She stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled like coffee and old books. Comfortable, lived in, real. She led me to the kitchen and gestured for me to sit. "I won't waste your time," she said. "If you're here, it means they've already started." "They have," I replied. She nodded. "They always do it the same way." My heart picked up. How I asked. She leaned back in her chair. "They find someone young, ambitious, someone who wants to build something bigger than themselves. Ethan, they come in offering help," she continued. "Guidance, connections, opportunity. Victor, they earn trust first," she said. "Then they start isolating the person from anyone who might question them." My chest tightened. "That's exactly what they're doing," I said. She nodded again. "Then comes the confusion," she added. "Documents, numbers, things that don't quite add up but look real enough." "The money," I said. "Yes," she replied. "They create a narrative where someone else is responsible, usually someone close, someone the victim already trusts." I swallowed. "The father?" I said, quietly. She looked at me, understanding in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. I shook my head. "Don't be. Just tell me, how does it end?" She hesitated, then answered. "They take control," she said. "Financial decisions, access, everything. And then they leave," she said. "Before the truth fully catches up." Silence filled the room. "And the victim?" I asked. She looked down at her hands. "They're left trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't." I exhaled slowly. "That's not going to happen to my son," I said. She met my gaze. "Then you need to act fast," she said. "Because once they have full control, it's almost impossible to undo." I leaned forward. "Will you tell him?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "I don't mean publicly," I added. "Just talk to him. Tell him what they did to you." She stared at the table, then slowly shook her head. "They'll deny it," she said. "They always do." "I don't mean publicly," I added. "Just talk to him. Tell him what they did to you." She stared at the table, then slowly shook her head. "They'll deny it," she said. "They always do." "Maybe," I said, "but it won't just be me anymore." She looked up, and for the first time, I saw something shift in her expression. Not fear, not hesitation, resolve. "They took a lot from me," she said quietly. "I know, and I stayed silent," she added. I didn't interrupt, because I knew this was the moment, the one that mattered. She looked at me again. "Give me a day," she said. I nodded. "That is all I need." She stood up. "I'll call you," she added. I stood as well. "Thank you," I said. She didn't respond. Not with words, but with something stronger. A decision. I walked out of her house with something I hadn't had before. Not just evidence. Not just suspicion. But a voice. And when that voice finally spoke, everything Victor and Sophie had built was going to collapse. Waiting is a strange kind of pressure. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just sits there, quiet and heavy, pressing on every thought until you start questioning everything again. Margaret had said one day. Just one day. But that day felt longer than everything that had come before it. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't push. Because I knew if I tried to force him now, I might undo everything that had started to shift. Doubt is fragile. Push too hard, and it snaps back into certainty. Instead, I stayed home. Sat at the same kitchen table. The same one where everything had started to fall apart. But this time, the silence felt different. Not empty, not hopeless, waiting. Around mid-afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the number. I knew. "Hello?" I said. "It's Margaret," she replied. Her voice was steady, but there was something under it now. Decision. "I'm ready," she said. My grip tightened slightly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "I've had enough of staying quiet." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "When do you want to do this?" she asked. "Now," I said. There was no hesitation. "Give me the address," she replied. I gave it to her. Then I hung up. And for the first time since this began, I felt something close to certainty. Not hope, not yet, but direction. I called Ethan next. It rang twice. 3 times. Then, "Yeah," he answered. His voice was tired, guarded. "It's me," I said. A pause. "I know. I need you to come over," I said. Silence for what he asked. I took a breath. "There's someone you need to hear from," I said. "I don't want another argument," he replied. "It's not an argument," I said. "It's the truth. From someone who has nothing to gain from lying to you." Another pause. Longer this time. "Is this about them?" he asked. "Yes." I could hear him thinking. You can always hear it. That shift between resistance and curiosity. "It'll come," he said finally. "Good," I replied. "And Dad?" "Yeah, if this is just more of the same, it's not," I said. Then I hung up, because I didn't want to give him space to doubt it again. An hour later, he walked through the door, slow, careful, like he wasn't sure what he was walking into. He looked around the house for a moment, not like he used to, not comfortable, just aware. "Where is she?" he asked. "She'll be here?" I said. He nodded. We stood there in silence, the kind that used to feel normal, but now felt strained. "I've been thinking," he said after a while. "Good," I replied. He glanced at me. "About everything." I didn't interrupt. "Some of it doesn't add up," he admitted. My chest tightened slightly, but I kept my voice steady. "Like what, the timing," he said. "The way things escalated so fast." I nodded. "And the documents?" I asked. "They look real," he said. But your records, they make sense too." There it was, the crack widening. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Ethan stiffened slightly. "That's her," I said. I walked over and opened it. Margaret stood there. Same calm presence. Same sharp eyes. But now there was something stronger behind them. Resolve. "Margaret," I said. She nodded. "Isaac." Then she looked past me, at Ethan, and I saw it happen. That moment, that recognition, because she didn't just see a stranger. She saw a version of herself, years ago, before everything fell apart. "Et Han," I said. "This is Margaret Collins." That recognition, because she didn't just see a stranger. She saw a version of herself, years ago, before everything fell apart. "Ethan," I said, "this is Margaret Collins." He stepped forward slightly. "Hi," he said, unsure. "Hello?" she replied. Her voice softened just a little. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this." Ethan frowned. "Why?" She stepped inside. "Because I was where you are now." Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Ethan's expression shifted. "What do you mean?" he asked. Margaret looked at me briefly, then back at him. "I met them," she said. "Victor, Sophie, or whatever names they were using at the time." Ethan's body went still. "That's not possible," he said. "It is," she replied calmly. "They said, I know what they said," she cut in gently. "They said this was their first time, that they were helping you build something, that everything would be transparent." Ethan didn't respond, because those were the exact words. "You trusted them," she continued. "Yes," he said quietly. "So did I," she said. He swallowed. "What happened?" he asked. Margaret took a slow breath. "They built everything carefully," she said. "Gained my trust. Helped me make decisions. Showed me documents that looked real." Ethan's hands clenched slightly. And then he asked. "They started creating confusion," she said. "Numbers that didn't quite match. Records that suggested something was wrong." Ethan looked at me, then back at her. "They said it was my partner," he said. Margaret nodded. "They always blame someone close." His face went pale. "They said my father." "I know," she said softly. Silence again. This time different, heavier, because now it wasn't just doubt. It was fear. "What happened to you?" he asked. Margaret looked down for a moment, then back up. "They took control," she said, "of everything. My accounts, my decisions." Ethan's breathing quickened. "And then they disappeared," she said. The word hung in the air. Disappeared, like nothing had ever existed. Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "That's not—" "It is," she said firmly. "And by the time I realized it, it was too late." Silence. Long, unavoidable. Ethan stepped back slightly, like the room had shifted around him. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Margaret held his gaze. "Because no one told me," she said. That landed. Hard. And I saw it. Really saw it. The moment everything started to break. Not just crack. Break. Ethan looked at me again. But this time, there was no distance in his eyes. Just confusion, regret, and something else. Fear. Real fear. "They wouldn't," he started. "They already are," I said quietly. He turned back to Margaret. "Is there proof?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I kept records," she said. "Not everything, but enough." Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. Then opened them again. And when he did, he wasn't the same. Because now, he wasn't choosing between stories. He was seeing the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can't go back. The truth doesn't explode. It unfolds. Slowly, painfully, piece by piece, until there's nowhere left to hide. Ethan stood there, staring at Margaret like the ground beneath him had shifted, because it had. Not all at once, but enough. "You're saying," he started, his voice unsteady, "this is all planned?" Margaret didn't rush her answer. "Yes," she said simply. Silence followed. Not confusion anymore, not denial. Something heavier, something harder to carry. Ethan looked down at the documents again, then at his hands, like he was trying to figure out when he lost control. "They told me," he said slowly, "they told me everything was transparent." Margaret gave a faint, sad smile. "They told me that too." He let out a quiet breath. "They said my father was hiding things." Her expression softened. "They needed someone to blame," she said. "Someone close enough that you'd feel the betrayal, but far enough that they could step in as the solution." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's exactly what happened," he murmured. "I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because now, he was connecting it himself. They kept pushing me," he continued, "asking questions, showing me those documents." Margaret nodded. "Confusion is their strongest tool," she said. "If they can make you doubt what you already know, they can replace it with what they want you to believe." Ethan closed his eyes, and I saw it. That moment, the one where memory and manipulation collide. "They made it feel real," he said. "That's because it was designed to," she replied. Silence again. Then Ethan looked at me, really looked at me, and this time there was no distance, no hesitation, just something raw. "I should have listened to you," he said quietly. The words hit harder than anything else. Not because I needed to hear them, but because of what they meant. He saw it now. At least, most of it. "It's not about that," I said. "Yes, it is," he insisted. "You tried to warn me." And He stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence. "Because some things are too heavy to say out loud." Margaret stood slowly. "They're not done yet," she said. Ethan turned to her. "What do you mean?" "If they think you're pulling away," she said, "they'll try to regain control." "How?" "Pressure," she replied. "Urgency. They'll make you feel like you have to act quickly, that if you don't, you'll lose something." Ethan frowned. "They already did that," he said. "They kept talking about deadlines, about finalizing things." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. "What kind of things?" I asked. Ethan hesitated, then answered. "They wanted me to sign over control of the investment account," he said. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Margaret nodded slowly. "That's the end game," she said. Ethan's face went pale. "I was going to," he admitted. That one sentence. It almost stopped my heart. When I asked, "Tomorrow," he said. Everything in the room shifted. Because now. This wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about timing. "They're moving fast," Margaret said. "Because they know they're close," I added. Ethan ran his hands over his face again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was realization. "I almost signed everything away," he said. "You didn't," I replied. "But I would have," he insisted. "Yes," I said, "but you didn't." He looked at me, and for the first time since this started, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Trust. Fragile. Shaken. But there. "What do we do now?" he asked. Margaret and I exchanged a glance, because we both knew this was the moment that mattered. "You don't confront them alone," she said. Ethan nodded. "And you don't let them control the situation," I added. He took a breath. "They're expecting me tomorrow," he said. "To sign." "Good," I said. He frowned. "Good." "Yes," I repeated, "because now we know exactly where they'll be." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "You're thinking of confronting them?" she said. "I'm thinking of ending this," I replied. Ethan looked between us. How he asked. I stepped closer to the table, placing my hands on the documents. "By making sure they can't talk their way out of it," I said. "Margaret's way out of it," I said. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "You need more than just me," she said. "I know," I replied. Ethan's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "we make sure this isn't just your word against theirs." It's narrowed slightly. "You'll need more than just me," she said. "I know," I replied. Ethan's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "we make sure this isn't just your word against theirs." Silence. Then Margaret nodded slowly. "I can bring my records," she said. "Everything I kept." "Do it," I replied. Ethan looked uncertain. "Will that be enough?" he asked. I held his gaze. "No," I said honestly, "but it will be enough to break their control." He swallowed. "And then they make mistakes," I said, "because people like Victor and Sophie, they rely on control, on calm, on precision. Take that away, and they slip." Margaret crossed her arms. "You're right," she said. "They don't handle exposure well." Ethan exhaled slowly. "This is a lot," he admitted. "I know," I said. He looked at me again. "I thought I understood what was happening," he said. "But I didn't." "That's how it works," I replied. He nodded. Then after a moment, "I'm sorry," he said. The words were quiet, but real. And for a second, everything else faded. Because no matter what had happened, no matter how far things had gone, he was still my son. "Well, deal with that later," I said gently. He gave a small nod. Because he understood. This wasn't the time for healing. This was the time for truth. Margaret stepped toward the door. "I'll get everything I have," she said. "Meet you there tomorrow." "Thank you," I replied. She paused, then looked at Ethan. "They're not as strong as they seem," she said. "They just need people to believe they are." He nodded slowly. "I won't make that mistake again." She gave a faint smile, then left. The door closed behind her, and once again, it was just me and Ethan. But this time, the silence wasn't broken. It was shared. "We're going to face them," he said. "Yes, and we're going to end this," he added. "Yes." He took a deep breath, then nodded. "All right," he said. And in that moment, I knew. The next time we saw Victor and Sophie, it wouldn't be on their terms. It would be on ours. And this time, they wouldn't be in control. The next morning didn't feel like a normal day. It felt like standing at the edge of something you can't step away from once you move forward. Ethan didn't say much on the drive. Neither did I. Margaret sat quietly in the back seat, a folder resting on her lap, her hands steady in a way that told me she had already made peace with what was about to happen. We weren't guessing anymore. We weren't searching. We were walking into the truth. Victor's place looked exactly the same as the day before. Calm, ordered, controlled. That illusion again. But this time, I could see through it. Ethan knocked. Once. Twice. The door opened. Victor stood there, dressed neatly like he had been expecting something, but not this. "Ethan," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. "I was wondering if you were still coming." Then his eyes shifted. To me. Then to Margaret. And just like that, everything changed. Not visibly. Not to someone who didn't know what to look for. But I saw it. That split second. That flicker of recognition in Sophie's eyes when she stepped into view behind him. She knew Margaret, and Margaret knew her. "That's far enough," Margaret said calmly as we stepped inside. Victor's smile tightened. "Well," he said, "this is unexpected." Ethan didn't sit, didn't move further into the room. He stayed standing. That was important, because it meant he wasn't comfortable anymore. "Before we do anything else," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm, "we're going to talk." Victor raised an eyebrow slightly. "Of course," he said smoothly. "That's what we've always been doing." "No," Ethan replied. "You've been talking? I've been listening." Silence. Sophie crossed her arms subtly. "What's this about?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer her. He looked at Victor. "Who is she?" he asked, gesturing toward Margaret. Victor didn't hesitate. "I have no idea," he said. "Lie, clean, immediate, but not good enough." Margaret stepped forward. "That's funny," she said, "because you knew me well enough to take everything I had." The room froze. Not metaphorically, actually froze. Victor didn't move, but Sophie did, just slightly. "Enough." "That's a serious accusation," Victor said calmly. "As a memory," Margaret replied. Ethan's breathing shifted. "Faster now. Is she lying?" he asked. Victor turned to him. "Ethan, you need to understand. Is she lying?" Ethan repeated. Sophie stepped in. "We've never met her," she said. Margaret smiled faintly. "You've never met Margaret Collins," she said. "But you've met the woman who trusted you under a different name. That hit hard, because it wasn't just a claim. It was specific." "Different name?" Ethan asked. Margaret nodded. "They change names," she said. "Change locations. But the pattern stays the same." Victor's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Is it?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, sharp, cold. "Yes," he said. "And frankly, this is starting to look like desperation." "Desperation," Margaret repeated. "No. Desperation was me sitting in my living room just like Ethan, believing every word you said." Sophie took a step forward. "Enough," she said. "We're not going to entertain this." Ethan stepped back slightly. But not away. Not toward them. Just away from everything. "Then explain it," he said. "Explain what Victor asked." Ethan picked up the documents Margaret had brought. "These," he said. "Your names, your companies, the complaints." Victor didn't even look at them. "Anyone can compile records," he said. "That doesn't make them true." Margaret let out a soft breath. "You always say that," she said. Ethan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "They always say the same things," she replied. "Deny, redirect, stay calm." Victor's eyes flickered. There it was again, that crack. "Ethan," he said, his tone softer now, more controlled. This is exactly what I warned you about. Confusion, misdirection. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, he said. This is clarity, silence. And then everything broke. Not physically, not loudly, but completely. Why did you lie to me? Ethan asked. Victor didn't answer. Sophie didn't move. Because now they knew. The control was gone. We didn't lie, Victor said finally. Then what is this? Ethan demanded, holding up the papers. Old business? He replied. You said this was your first time. You said it was your first time, Ethan cut in. The room tightened. Because now, the script wasn't working anymore. Margaret stepped closer. You told me the same thing she said. Victor turned to her. You need to leave, he said coldly. No, Ethan said. The word landed like a wall. No one's leaving, he added. Victor's expression changed. For the first time since I met him, the calm cracked. You're making a mistake, he said. No, Ethan replied. I already did that. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Sophie looked at Victor again. That glance, that same glance Ethan had noticed before. And this time, he saw it clearly. Why do you keep looking at him? Ethan asked. Sophie froze. Just for a second, then recovered. I'm not. Yes, you are, he said. You've been doing it the whole time. Victor stepped forward. That's enough, he said. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Everything you said, Ethan continued. Every explanation, every answer. It always came from him first. Victor didn't respond, because there was no response left. Margaret shook her head slowly. They can't control it now, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, then back at them. And I saw it, the final shift. Not doubt, not confusion, certainty. You used me, he said. No anger, no shouting, just truth, and that made it worse. Victor exhaled slowly. You're emotional right now, he said. No, Ethan replied. I'm aware. Silence. Then, we're done, Ethan said. Victor's eyes narrowed. You don't understand what you're walking away from. Ethan shook his head. No, he said. I understand exactly what I'm walking away from. He turned to me, and for the first time since all of this started, he stood beside me. Not physically at first, but emotionally, and that was enough. We're leaving, he said. Margaret nodded. I didn't say anything, because I didn't need to. We walked out together, and this time, they didn't stop us. Because they couldn't. Because the moment the truth is seen, control disappears. Completely. And there's nothing left to hold on to. The silence in the car on the way back felt different. Not heavy, not suffocating, just real. Ethan sat beside me staring out the window, his reflection faint against the glass. Margaret had gone her own way after everything was said. She didn't need to stay. She had already done more than enough. And now, it was just us again, like it used to be, but not quite. I didn't see it, Ethan said suddenly. His voice was low, almost to himself. I didn't interrupt. I thought I was being smart, he continued. careful, like I was finally doing something on my own. I kept my eyes on the road. You were, I said. He turned slightly. No, he shook his head. I was being played. There was no anger in his voice, just clarity, and that was harder to hear. They knew exactly what to say, he went on, exactly how to make me doubt everything else. I nodded. That's how people like that work. He let out a quiet breath. I thought you were holding me back, he said. That one lingered. I know, I replied, and I believed it, he added. Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. I should have trusted you, he said finally. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. Then I looked at him. You trusted what you saw, I said, and they made sure you saw what they wanted. He shook his head again. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed, but it's an explanation. He didn't respond right away, because he was still working through it. All of it. The betrayal, the manipulation, the realization that he had turned against the one person who never would have hurt him. I said some things he started. I remember I said. His jaw tightened. I didn't mean them. I know, I replied. He looked at me, surprised. How do you know? Because you're my son. I didn't say it out loud, but I think he understood anyway. We sat there for a moment, neither of us moving. Then he opened the door and stepped out. I followed. The house looked the same as always, but stepping inside, it felt like we were walking into something new. Not fixed, not healed, but possible. Ethan stopped in the living room, right where everything had started. He looked around slowly, at the couch, the table, the space where Victor had sat, where Sophie had stood, where he had looked at me and said he didn't trust me. He exhaled slowly. They really almost took everything, he said. Not everything, I replied. He glanced at me. What do you mean? They didn't take you, I said. That landed, quiet, but deep. He looked down for a second, then nodded. They almost did, he said. Almost doesn't count, I replied. Silence. Then, what happens to them now? He asked. I leaned back against the wall slightly. They'll move on, I said. Find someone else. Try again. His expression darkened. That's it, he asked. They just walk away. For now, I said, unless someone stops them. He looked at me. Should we report them? He asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. And Margaret? He added. She'll help, I replied. But it takes time. These kinds of cases, they're complicated. He nodded slowly. I want to do something, he said. You already did, I replied. He frowned. What? You stopped it, I said, before it went too far. He didn't look convinced. I almost signed everything away, he repeated. But you didn't, I said again. He exhaled, long, heavy. Then he walked over to the table. The same table where I had laid out the real documents. They were still there, exactly as I had left them. He picked one up, looked at it. Every dollar, he said quietly. Yes, all of it for me. Yes. He swallowed. I never asked you where it came from, he said. You didn't need to. I should have, he replied. I shook my head. No, I said. You should have trusted what you already knew. He looked up at me, and this time There was no hesitation. "I trust you now," he said. Simple, direct, real. And somehow, that meant more than anything else. We stew meant more than anything else. We stewed there for a moment, just letting that exist. Then he stepped closer. "Not all the way. Not like when he was a kid, but enough." "I miss sorry," he said again, this time there for a moment, just letting that exist. Then he stepped closer. "Not all the way. Not like when he was a kid, but enough." "I'm sorry," he said again. This time, different. Not just words, something behind them. "I know," I replied, and I did. Because apology isn't about the sentence. It's about the understanding. And he had that now. We didn't hug. Not yet. Some things take time, but something between us shifted. Back. Not to what it was before, but to something stronger. Because now, it wasn't just built on love. It was built on truth. Later that evening, we sat at the kitchen table again. The same chairs, the same space, but the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. "I keep thinking about something," Ethan said. "What?" "How easy it was," he said, "for them to make me doubt you." I nodded. "That's what they do. But it shouldn't have been that easy," he added. "No." I agreed. "It shouldn't have." He looked down at his hands. "I don't ever want that to happen again." "It won't?" I said. "How do you know?" "Because now you've seen it," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "I have. And once you see something like that, it changes you. Not in a bad way, but in a permanent one. You learn, you notice, you trust differently, more carefully, but also more honestly." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "I guess I still have a lot to figure out," he said. "Of course you do," I replied. "We both do." He gave a small, tired smile. "At least now I know who's on my side." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because that was already clear. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt like home again. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment. It doesn't arrive with a speech or an apology or even the truth itself. It comes quietly in the days after, in the small things, the things that don't look important until you realize they are everything. A week passed. No calls from Victor. No messages from Sophie. Nothing. They were gone, just like Margaret said they would be. And yet their absence didn't feel like relief at first. It felt like aftermath, like walking through a storm after it's passed and seeing what's still standing. Ethan stayed, not because I asked him to, but because he chose to. That mattered, more than anything else. The first morning, after everything, I woke up early out of habit. The house was quiet, but not empty. I walked into the kitchen and stopped. Ethan was already there, standing at the stove, burning something. I almost smiled. "Careful," I said. "You're about to ruin that pan." He jumped slightly, then turned. "Oh yeah," he said quickly, adjusting the heat. "What are you making?" I asked. He looked down at it. "I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. That made me laugh. A real laugh. Not forced. Not careful. Just real. He looked at me surprised. "I guess I still have a lot to learn," he said. We both do, I replied. He nodded slowly. Then after a moment, sit, he said. I raised an eyebrow. That bad? Probably, he said, but you're eating it anyway. So I sat and watched him move around the kitchen, awkward but trying. Really trying. And that's when it hit me. Not everything had been lost. Because effort means something. We ate in silence at first. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then he spoke. I keep thinking about what Margaret said, he admitted. About how they isolate people. He said, how they make you doubt the ones closest to you. I nodded. That's how they take control. He looked down at his plate. I let them do that, he said. Yes, I replied. He glanced up. I didn't soften it, didn't sugarcoat it, because this wasn't the time for that. But you stopped it, I added. He nodded slightly. I almost didn't. But you did, I said again. He let out a slow breath. I don't ever want to be that blind again, he said. You won't be, I replied. How do you know? Because now you know what it looks like, I said. He thought about that, then nodded. Yeah, he said. I do. Later that afternoon, we sat in the living room, the same place where everything had fallen apart. But now, it felt different. Not because the past was gone, but because it had been faced. I reported them, Ethan said. I looked at him. When? This morning, he replied. I sent everything. The documents, Margaret's information, everything we had. I nodded. Good. They said it might take time, he added. It will, I said. He leaned back. But at least it's something, he said. Yes, I agreed. It is. Silence settled again. Then I was so sure, he said quietly. About what? About them, he replied. About what they were telling me. It felt real. That's the point, I said. He nodded. I know. He hesitated, then looked at me. How did you know, he asked. I leaned back slightly. Because I've seen enough broken things to recognize when something doesn't fit, I said. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? Engines, I explained. People bring them in all the time. They say one thing is wrong, but when you look closer, the problem is somewhere else entirely. He smiled faintly. And you saw that here? Yes, I said. Something didn't sound right? He nodded. I wish I had that instinct. You will, I replied. It comes with time. He looked around the room again, then back at me. I almost lost this, he said. Yes, I said, and I almost lost you. I didn't answer right away, because that one mattered. You didn't, I said finally. But I could have, he insisted. Yes, I agreed. You could have. Silence. Then, why didn't you give up on me? He asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, because that question, that was the heart of everything. Because you're my son, I said, simply. He swallowed. That's it. That's everything, I replied. His eyes filled slightly, not with tears, but with something close. Understanding. I don't deserve that, he said quietly. Yes, you do, I replied. He shook his head. After everything I said, you were manipulated, I said. That doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed, but it explains it. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I want to fix this, he said. You are, I replied. How? By being here, I said. By choosing to see the truth. By not running from it. He nodded slowly. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Good, I replied, because that's how healing starts. Not with words, but with staying. That evening, we sat on the porch, the sun setting slowly, casting long shadows across the yard. The same yard where he used to play as a kid. The same place where everything had felt simple once. It's strange, he said. What is? How quickly things can change, he replied. Yes, I said, and how quickly they can almost be lost. I nodded. That's why you have to hold on to what matters. He looked at me. I know what matters now, he said. I didn't ask what he meant, because I already knew. We sat there until the light faded completely. Neither of us rushing to go inside, because for the first time in a long time, there was no tension, no doubt, just peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And sometimes that's enough. After everything Isaac went through, one truth stood out clearly. Trust is not just about believing someone. It's about knowing them even when doubt tries to cloud your judgment. And sometimes the people who love us most are the easiest to overlook until we almost lose them. This story reminds us that manipulation often comes disguised as help, and truth doesn't always shout. It waits patiently to be seen. But when it finally is, it has the power to rebuild what seemed broken beyond repair. If you've ever been in a situation where you doubted someone you loved or someone doubted you, what did you learn from it? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if this story meant something to you, you can like or subscribe, but more importantly, stay connected for more stories like this. You're not alone in what you've been through.